our next set of speakers. This is going to be a very insightful conversation with our next set of speakers. First up is Neha, who is the co-founder of Tracxn, Neha Singh. Yes, hi Neha. Please round of applause. Sh- uh, Tracxn is a private market intelligence platform. Tracxn is one of the largest private market intelligence platforms tracking startups and emerging technology sectors globally, used by venture capital funds, private equity funds, and Fortune 500 corporates across 40 countries. Prior to Tracxn, Neha was a venture capitalist at Sequoia Capital. Neha did her engineering from IIT Bombay, where she graduated with Institute Silver Medal. She also got the Google Women in Engineering Award, recognizing student achievers in the field of CS. Neha did her MBA from GSB Stanford. She has been awarded Fortune 40 Under 40 by Fortune India Magazine, Outstanding Women Award by Outlook Business. The next one is Aditi Aggarwal. Do we have Aditi with us? Okay, hi Aditi. So she heads growth at Recur Club, a new age subscription-based financing platform. Prior to that, she was leading growth partnerships between India and Australian institutions at the Trade and Investment Office of the Australian High Commission. She comes with rich experience of working in international sports, financial services, and international education for brands like Man U, Formula One, and Amex Express Black. She's a voracious traveler with experience of traveling across 40 plus countries. So round of applause, please, for Neha, for Aditi, sorry. The next one is Varun Mayya. Who is a Bloomsbury published author and CEO of Avalon Scenes, a community product used by communities across the world. Varun, do we have you with us right now? Oh, hey, Varun. The next one, the final speaker, Oliver Jones, CEO of Bombay Play, has a decade of game design and development experience at Zynga, co-founder at Moonfrog, and followed by director of design at Glue Mobile. Together with his ex-colleague, Abhas, he co-founded Bombay Play in order to bring together the diverse talent of India and launch world-class games. Oliver and Abbas continue to play an influential role in elevating India's gaming community. And not to be biased over here, they are a portfolio company, but you got to check out their games. Super fun. Could we have all the speakers on stage, please? And a round of applause, please.
So firstly, thank you guys for making it here. We were actually supposed to have 4 people, but Amit couldn't make it last minute, so I apologize for that. But we still have like a very entertaining, very insightful conversation up for grabs. And hopefully, we're able to learn a thing or two about communities. So I just want to introduce the panel. I know they've been introduced once, but I'm going to do it again. So Aditi works at Recur Club. I think Recur, and I got to know about Recur a few months ago. They are revenue-based financing with a twist. I'll let her speak about it by herself. Then Neha works at Tracxn. I've known Tracxn for many, many, many years. And in fact, Tracxn is a website that I used to go to just to find out about, our competitors. So thank you so much for that. And then there's Oliver, who runs Bombay Play. Bombay Play is a gaming startup. And again, very close to my heart because I actually started out as a game designer. I told Oliver this yesterday. So I have very personal questions for him. Hopefully he'll be able to answer it, right? Awesome. So the topic for today, guys, is thoughtful community building, a long-term moat. Full disclosure, we run a community platform, so I'm not going to talk about that at all. I want this conversation to be focused about you guys and the kind of plans you guys have for community, what you've learned, etc. And hopefully, there is some crosstalk and conversation that happens. Awesome. So, Oliver, I want to start with you because, it's just, you're closest, right? In your opinion, right, and in your experience, what's it been like to build a community of gamers who can come and be part of your beta tests, right? Do you guys actually do that, and what have you learned from it?
Sure. Am I audible? Or shall I just shout? Thank you. You spent like 5 minutes putting on the mic. And yeah, we actually do that, but perhaps not in the way that you might think, or majority of people might think, like when you say community of gamers, I think people's minds turn to sort of somebody with a neck beard, spends most of their time on Reddit, maybe. No offense to anyone who might be doing that. But actually the majority of gamers, you know, the billion plus people who play games and actually spend most of the time playing games are not a casual gamers. And they don't exist on Discord, they exist on Facebook, and they're arguably more brutal. They're actually arguably more active as well. And yeah, so we do build communities around our games, usually using sort of more traditional. Also, like our audience is actually very, very old, like seriously old, like 35 and over, like seriously.
Is that the average age?
That's a joke.
Oh.
Sorry?
I was like, is that the average age? I was confused.
No, well, it is for us. Like the people who are, they're bored. They have lots of spare time. Our customers are in the US mostly, UK, Australia. Spend lots of time on Facebook. But Facebook, social media is boring, right? And so they prefer to spend their time in communities where they have a sort of common interest. Yeah. And gaming is a great one. That's when you play a game, it's like you make a story, and what people love to do is share their stories with each other. What happened today? Yeah. Right? So I think when it came to making a community, it really was about making a product that allowed people to share their stories easily with each other. And that story can't be a generic thing like, hey, check out my IQ from this game or whatever. It has to be something with a bit more nuanced detail that tells people something about myself. Yeah. So once you have a good, solid product that tells nice stories, you can build your community around it. And that's when you can build your critical mass. So our community has over, I believe, like 10,000 followers, and they all actively posting. And once we have that sort of, our communities have over like 10,000 posts in like a day, just from sharing. And what we do is cross-promote our other games and things. Our users don't understand things like loot boxes or game skins. In fact, they probably think game skins sound somewhat gross. They wouldn't engage in that. But what they do engage in is simple concepts like tournaments and that's how we've sort of, so we develop one sort of anchor community on which we can sort of test, validate new ideas, soft launches, and release features just to that community and get their feedback. Yeah, so that's how we approach it.
Yeah. And has that guided direction over the last few years? What they want, what the community wants?
Yeah, I think the community has been very helpful, especially in the kind of games that we make. Especially when it comes to the UX, they find lots of things. In fact, a majority of these people would not consider themselves gamers even. Yeah. So if you present to them sort of something that may make intuitive sense to guys like you and I, we love competition, leaderboards, leads, things that are intuitive to gamers. You give that same feature to them, and they're like, WTF? What are you trying to do? How does this work? What's an ELO ranking? Why are you giving this to me? Yeah. Take it away. I want soup. That's it really does inform our UX and UI quite a bit.
That's interesting.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I think, Aditi, thank you so much for joining us. And like I was mentioning to the crowd, right? My first interaction with Recur was actually, I don't remember who it was with. It was with the person from Recur. And I was like, this is going to change the way businesses operate, especially businesses like ours, right? Because it now adds a new option on the table. So one of the questions I have for you is, what's the plan this year and probably the next, because communities take time? What's the plan to build an online ecosystem of founders? Because I know you guys target founders. And what's the plan to build an offline ecosystem of founders? Right? Just your community plans in general, because it's very difficult to find high quality founders, right? And they're being chased by VCs and capital from all over. So what's your plan, attacking that market?
So the smart plan is to partner with all of them, whether it is VCs or whether it is semi-government bodies like NASSCOM and METI. or whether these are community, as in SaaS communities are our ICP one. So SaaS communities likes of SaaS Bhumi or SaaS Insider, etc. So that's the plan. But the mission is to actually be able to help all recurring revenue businesses with predictable revenue to across sectors likes of edtech or SaaS or ITES, give them a new option, new asset class, and do this while the mission is we create a community, and it's a niche one. I mean, if you say a founder needs X, Y, Z, do you know a community which says we focus on being sort of a community which specializes in financial advisory, community which is like a one-stop shop wherein we say that we are a co-founder with expertise of efficient capital management.
Yeah.
So that, like super niche in that way. And we want to welcome founders who are looking and who don't have access to a fractional CFO like that.
Yeah.
So that's the mission really. And as far as I'm a super relationship person, always out there. So I believe the plan is to participate with partners and partner events like these. Online and offline are just mediums, whether it is a community on Slack channel, whether it is community on, the events, whether it is any and every meetup, whether it is a focus group, dedicated discussion, which we organize or our partner organize. We just want to be there. We just want to make sure that they know something like Recur Club exists. And when we do it, we will do it
Big.
in our way. And yeah. That's
So like, would you have like one large event per year, like, with 1,000 people attending, or you plan to do it smaller?
So far, we are doing it small, focused, because it's a super niche community.
Got it.
There's a lot of education that we are building along the way. One of the first and one of the fastest growing. So, but I mean, it's not a no. We are doing events. We want to possibly be able to do large ones also. But the idea is, and comes from the founders, right? Like, we want to see where the objective is met, not just like, because the community is niche for us.
Yeah.
That way.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the question.
Hi, Neha. So I'll repeat it for posterity, right? Like, Tracxn has been a good source of inspiration for us, good source of humility as well. Because, you wake up and you open Tracxn and then somebody's like raced past you. So one question I have for you guys and your team in general, right, is I think you work with a lot of VCs. And over the last 2 years, I've seen VCs really get into community. They're running accelerator programs. They're running, it's like sort of maybe the YC model, but done in everyone's own style, right? So what are your learnings from VC communities? Because you've been, so close to them and you've seen them, probably spoken to them a million times about this. I'd love to know.
Right. Yeah, so, hopefully people know what Tracxn is, but essentially we work with, investors and corporates globally. And yes, actually VCs have been fairly active in building communities. If you see, in the customer segments that we interact with. So just to give you a few examples, which we have seen, done very well. There are a few formats that people have used. So one is obviously content. Right now I'm sure a lot of you would have heard about podcasts from various VCs. Like Excel has it, Matrix has it, Prime has it, lots of Andreessen Horowitz has it. So that is one format wherein it's very intangible. Investment team professionals are taking out time to sort of give it back to the community. That's one interesting format which is there. The second is online communities. So everyone, for instance, has some format of online community right now. People have gone to different levels, like a fund, like a first round. They have an internal Quora for their portfolio, founders, wherein they can actually ask questions, etc. So people have done different versions of community. That's another interesting one. I think the third, which I've seen very interesting, is events. I think interesting example is my Stanford roommate So after graduation, I was just asking her what is her interest, and she was like, I want to go into events. And I was wondering, like, what's a job career in events like, after MBA, why would you want to go into events? Apparently, she actually headed that events vertical in Andreessen Horowitz. Across a couple of years, I think she would have done more than 100 or 200 events. And there are a variety of events that funds have started doing, which is events within their portfolio companies, events for the later stage investors, events with corporates, which is helping in either transactions like an M&A deal or even sales, right? So this is another format, which I've seen popularly used by a lot of the funds, and we obviously, as an enabler to funds, we would also want to help them do that. So, for instance, one of the common requests that we get, I want to organize a session wherein I want to match, right? There are a set of portfolio companies, there are a set of investors, and the investors want to meet the portfolio companies have some preference. So, can you help me execute this? So this in our sense is like an infrastructure layer to help our customers sort of be able to build their communities.
That's very insightful. I actually didn't know that Andreessen Horowitz did 100 events a year.
They do actually, across all the formats.
Yeah. I'm very sure they have like a dedicated Twitter person as well then, because it's always on Twitter. Right. So, I'm going to ask you a question now, Oliver, because, just on that note, right? I think we think about communities. I mean, for VCs, eventually, it's going to end up being deal flow, right? That's one of the important criteria for them. For you people at Bombay Play, I know how you think about community of your end users. How do you think about community of game developers or game designers in India? Because as somebody who's was in that space many, many years ago, it's just such a tiny pool, right? And they're so what do you call it? They're so particular, right? And they always have Unreal versus Unity battles, and you know what it's like, right? So tell us your experience of that. Yeah. How do you have that pipeline?
So a bit of context. So Bombay Play, we run the game dev meetup in Bangalore. Our group is roughly 500 game developers, so not, it's sizable, and we meet sort of once a month. And I think the question is like, why would you, why would you want to spend all the time and effort and money to run this thing in parallel to doing your startup? And the objective is not deal flow, because we're not. One could argue it's sort of hiring flow, but I prefer to think of it as brain flow, or rather more accurately, brain trust. Yeah. And I think this is really important in if you're in B2C, especially if you're in the creative market or creative industry, wherein it's very much like you can think of it like the movie industry. You're building scripts, you're building stories, and you're trying to launch them to the public. And how do you know if they're good or not when your app is just a Figma diagram or a storyboard? So how do you validate an idea before it's even, in a state where it can be A/B tested, where it can, and that's really what your brain trust is for. And this isn't a new concept. There's an interesting book on this. It's called Creativity Inc. By a chap called Ed Catmull. Yeah. And he's
from Pixar.
From Pixar. Yeah. And he talks about how Pixar came up with movie ideas and how they went through that validation process. So the problem is if you're just a group of very like-minded, usually male game developers who just love coding, what is the validation that you really, how are you supposed to build for like the world? So you really have to bring together not just game developers, but all manner of people who are good at troubleshooting, just very good at nitpicking your idea. I think we're living in the startup world. I think the world is schadenfreude. Like we take pleasure in other people's demise, I guess, and that's happening a lot recently with the macroeconomic condition. But if you bring a group of people who are actually aligned in the game developer community, we have something to prove. We want to build games in India that are world class. Yeah. Let's all get together and try and solve this thing, right? So once everybody is aligned in that way, then you can actually get them to focus on constructive feedback. That is, you leave egos at the door, and you can just focus on the problem solving. And that's really what our game developer sort of community is all about. It's about bringing the best brains together you can possibly find and validating those ideas.
It's like problem solving at scale.
Yeah, exactly. And you got to be careful. You shouldn't be like constantly going to the same people over and over again to validate ideas.
Yeah.
I mean, I love the folks at Leo, but you've got to cast the net
wider.
wider than that. Sorry, we're Leo portfolio, hence I'm here, I guess. But so having that group of people, inviting more. In fact, anyone here who wants to join or is interested in joining the Bangalore game dev or learning more about us, you're more than welcome to come join our group. It's 500 plus developers. Hit me up. I'll connect you. Yeah.
Wonderful. That's well put.
What I find interesting is he said 10,000 conversations a day.
Yeah.
I don't know how I'm going to make that happen in my community.
That's a great KPI. It's a great KPI. So Aditi, there's one thing that Oliver said, right, which is, I think the game dev community in India is mostly male developers. Now with founders, that skew also exists, right? It's mostly male and now changing. How do you plan to make the Recur Club community, whether it be the internal community, the people you guys and girls hire, or whether it be the people that or the founders you get on, how you plan to make it an inclusive community?
Interesting question, topic close to my heart. So my first month, I launched a program for women founders in collaboration with VHub. And since like Women's Day was closer, so we thought let's put it as be sensitive about the idea that probably women founders who are a little rarer, especially in SaaS community, in the SaaS community, let's focus on them. Let's see how we can help. So we lowered the bar when we say that for other founders, we are generally looking at 6.5 lakhs of MRR as their revenue. So we reduced it much lower. We had a wider coverage in terms of, accepting the other sectors also in terms of they may not have monthly or quarterly revenue, so like that. But macro plan exists to have, focus on sensitivity of the issue and have inclusive this thing, not just with women or, the gender parity, but also focusing on founders which are in tier 2 and tier 3. So as we speak, our founder is in the Surat event wherein the Chief Minister, etc., they're all focusing on, put Surat on the map of entrepreneurs now.
Yeah.
And recently, I think about a month back, my team attended an event where there was 100 plus founders in the SaaS Bhumi thing. So it's very interesting, how the movement is happening. So we want to make sure that we are part of it and we are supportive. And that's what community is about, flow of relationships and, the value that we plan to carry. First me as a professional and then at Recur Club as well. So, yeah.
No, that makes sense. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the question.
Yeah. Neha, last question to you, right? And then what I want to do is I also want to take some questions from the audience. Hopefully we get 1 or 2 gems that, we'll have some crosstalk, right? Because we have people from very different domains and very different people in general. So let's see what comes out of it. But before that, I asked you about the VC community. And I asked you how other VCs are creating communities. But I didn't ask you how you are creating communities, right? So I want to know what your plans are for community. Eventually, as the title says, it becomes a long-term moat, and it becomes a very visible long-term moat, right? Because eventually the community members become fans, and eventually those fans become your biggest evangelists, right? So what are you thinking on those lines?
Right, yeah. No, thanks for that question. So in terms of community, one of the things that, we have realized is there can be tangible thing, there can be intangible thing as well. For instance, you do something for the community that you are addressing to, which may not be directly, you will be directly benefiting or, doing thing, but it is essentially something which is which is required or which is valuable or which is liked by that community. So to give you one of the examples that we had done earlier is, earlier, like a couple of years back, we had actually, so like our community is people who are looking at the technology sector, right? So we had started newsletters by theme. So for instance, we had a India Tech newsletter, we had a China Tech newsletter, which is essentially giving you a roundup of daily news, interesting news which is there in India, or someone who wants to track China, it's there for China. Someone who wants to track fintech globally, there is a newsletter for that. Now that is not directly a product that we provide, right? But that is very relevant for the community that we want to address, because for them it is important to stay on top of anything essential which is happening in that, and obviously the news are fairly scattered across various, so we are able to sort of summarize it and they don't miss anything. So this was actually one of the initiatives that we had actually started and which was liked a lot by the readers, and we had to discontinue it because it just grew too much. So, but then people were kind of mailing, oh, why did you stop it? Can you do that? So I think this was one of our learning that you can actually have a community initiative which is not having direct tangible benefits to your business, but this is something that is generating goodwill, or this is something that is required by the community that you are addressing. That is also very much liked by them. I think that is one of the things that that we'll probably restart. So we are just building the infrastructure to restart it. The second I would say is more tangible. So I don't know if anyone has used Bloomberg. One of the things that people say in Bloomberg is the chat. That I don't know why there's like a very heavy, like any time I ask people that what's one of the most like nice features. I'll always hear chat one in like 4 times or 3 times. So this is another thing that within your community of users, can you actually sort of bridge that gap of communication, be it for deals, or be it for introductions, or be it for connect, right? So this is another thing which is very tangible to our business, which we'll launch. But it was interesting that you have to actually think about intangible as well as tangible initiatives within community when you think about in a business.
Oh, makes total sense. Yeah. When we set out to sort of solve the community problem, this is something we faced as well, right? Like we started with more like a CMS approach with our own business, and then everyone said, hey, give us interactivity, give us live. This is not like 1995, this is not WordPress, give us live. So we had to sort of build along the same lines that you're thinking along. Awesome. So let's switch gears to the audience. I already see a hand. Let's take maybe 3 questions, and then what I'd like is maybe everyone can give an opinion on these questions, because I'd love to hear that multi-industry sort of crosstalk happen. So yeah, I saw a hand.
Yeah, I actually have 2 questions since you're already taking the idea first.
Yeah.
The first one essentially is that developer community is a very growing community in India, right? And we actually at DevRev are working on building a developer community, specifically because in future we would also want them to contribute to our marketplace and make our platform richer. If they are interested and vested in all of that. So like few tips and tricks on how one could go about building a good developer community. I don't have to, I'll not repeat probably, that's the first one. And the second one is, I think what I've noticed personally when like I've tried to do community building in past is that consistency and like continuous engagement is hard to come by as well. Like you post something one day and then you don't post it in the, whatever your frequency is in the coming week and so on, and people get disengaged. So again, like any tips and like tricks around being consistent when community building, and do you also feel it's important? And of course, the developer community building aspect.
Yeah, I feel like this is a question to you.
Success. So our approach to this, building our game developer community was, so I'm not sure if it is fully applicable, but I'll just tell you from our experience. We designed our community like we design our games and made fun the focal point. And that's what really drew people in. And if you think about the psychology, community is not necessarily something people need. They can just simply not show up. and then that's how they quit. There's no, unsubscribe from community.
Yeah.
So really you have to think of what are the hooks you have into people's psychology to get them to keep coming back. So you have to really give them something to come back. I mean, maybe it's something that they need to maintain. Is there sort of a benefit that they really get out of coming? What is the story maybe that other people are sharing with them? What is the learning opportunity that perhaps they're missing out on? Yeah. So really, yeah, we made fun our focal point. It started off, beers with buddies, board games with buddies, but the agenda has always been clear. Bring your prototypes, bring your games, get feedback, and really try and get value.
Do you guys have thoughts on that? Do you guys want to add on? Feel free to.
Sure. So I think going back to basics of what does the community stand for and what is the value that you want the group to really have is something that I think you as a team must focus on while you are building any kind of initiatives and activities. And then the second thing is, of course, I mean, how she was putting it out there, the concept is paid forward. Unless you build on it, you thrive on it as a community leader, I don't think it would be as large as you think. And in my little experience of consulting Blockchain India, which is India's largest blockchain community, it's run by my younger brother, and from the early stages, we had so many learnings wherein engagement, which you shared as a problem, was, I feel it's very interactive and reactive depending upon what is the need of the community at that hour. And you have to absolutely continuously keep evolving with that need as a community leader. So this will be my little tip. And I'm all for community, so happy to have a chat whenever.
I can add actually one or two things to that. I think the best or model template communities for you to look at if you're running a dev community, one is Savo. It's the passwordless auth community. They've done really well. Like I think 11, either 4,000 or 11,000. I keep forgetting the number. They have 4,000 or 11,000 people on Discord. That's their entire deal flow engine. And the way they run that community is like a barrage of events. I think the one that's done it slightly less synchronously is Gojek. Gojek has like a huge content schedule. Just go to their YouTube. It's called Gojek Engineering, if I'm not wrong. Just go to their YouTube. It's like every day there's a video out, right? And they treat it like a proper, discipline. They're like, we have to wake up. You have your lead engineer. It's not the lead engineer running the Gojek Engineering YouTube. It's this other person, but he gets the lead engineer's time. He's like, I just need 10 minutes of your time. They shoot, wrap it up. They have like a studio, and then they move on to the next person. Right, so those are two great companies to look at, and it's good to templatize, and then you'll build your own twist on it. Anybody else? Shoot.
Hi there. So when generally we build a community out there, I've seen like that most of the communities are built on every additional users adds like value to the existing user database. And this generally depends on like the total amount of content machinery out there. So what steps one can incorporate apart from the content machinery in order to scale up a community?
Yeah. Do you guys have thoughts on that? Actually, I'll summarize the question and tell me if I've got it right. You're saying that every new user should add value to the previous user?
Yeah, every additional user should add value to the existing user database. And this generally like depends on like marketing on the content machinery out there. Yeah. What steps one can incorporate which will like eventually help the community to scale up apart from the content machinery?
So you're saying what beyond content for community?
Yep.
Yeah, that's a great question.
I would say create a cult around what you want to build in terms of expertise, because it is A to B to C to, I mean, it's like people to people, right? Like, which would be beyond your, essentially beyond your X user base. Would you want to ask a little more?
Yeah, sure. So for example, if someone is building a mental health community out there and then the people actually starts getting recovered, say they may actually leave the community out there, right? So how can we control the community and actually scale it up in such cases?
Well, I think if someone benefits from the community, and in my opinion, they don't really leave the community because that's what keeps them hooked on to the community. And this is one, I mean, I wouldn't be able to draw a percentage figure for mental health and wellness community as such, but I don't understand. I don't have the figures right now, but I believe like if someone is a beneficiary of that, they would definitely want to like again pay it forward as a concept. And beyond content, I feel real testimonials, real experiences, which could be like in person or while you are a beneficiary, you help the other one, which is beyond content, right? Could be a better, example, or what do you say? Could be a better method to create and expand the community.
And just to add to that, for instance, even if you, like if people are leaving the community, one is basically the content that they've contributed. The other one can also be the connections that can happen. For instance, if you have a very good database of people by geotagged to, who have left the community, and if I want to connect, like a new user wants to connect with people very close by, then they are able to do that. So having some sort of rich information about these people may also add value to the to the existing people in the community or the newcomer in the community. Right.
Do you have something to add?
Yes, from my understanding of the question, it's churn, right?
Yeah.
And churn tends to happen when there's no story left.
Yeah.
And so I would approach that problem as your community needs a North Star story to work towards. And when that story starts becoming, irrelevant, that's when they would churn. So maybe you need to think of a bigger story here in your particular problem.
Yeah.
And just to add to that, ideally, one of the key, just to add to, what Oliver was saying, one of the key points should be ideally a recurring use case than a one-off use case. Instead of having the key purpose of the community just a transient use case, it's better to have it like a long-term recurring use case. So if you just focus on that, maybe, then you will, it'll be a more like heavier used across a longer, life cycle.
Yeah. I'll tack onto that, right? So I think in my own experience, there are only 3 reasons somebody would run a community, and this is going to sound very primal. It's either money, why people would join a community. It's either to make money, or to solve or alleviate loneliness, or for devotion. If you don't have one of these 3 things, ideally more than one of these 3 things, it's not going to work, right? So just if you find people are churning, firstly, churn is normal. You will have some level of churn, but if you find like half your community leaving after they join and they just posts about random things, try to get one of these 3 things in. Like money, look at the NFT communities. Even though there might not be a very strong story on day 1, people will be like, and especially if it's a new thing, people will be like, you know what, worst case, I make 2x on this, right? So that's one incentive. The next one is loneliness. If you look at a lot of large YouTubers, they've got communities, and the YouTubers, when you get really, really large, you don't say anything, because you can't. You'll get cancelled if you say anything, right? So their communities are very, like the reason people watch that YouTuber is because they're sitting alone in their homes, their TVs or their screens are on, and they have nothing else to do. There's this huge movement around people eating. I think the food is mukbang, right? It's this thing. They eat it with a YouTuber on the other side of the screen eating with them because they have nobody else to eat with. And this is huge in like single child countries, right? And then finally it's devotion, and that's an obvious one, but that needs a very powerful story, ideally told from birth. This is my experience. Yeah, we'll take one last question. We have one hand there.
Sorry, I just grabbed the.
Oh, okay.
the mic
Sorry.
onto
Sorry.
me.
Garima.
Hi, Varun. So I have a question for each one of you, and I think per industry, what are some of the early metrics that you had when you built a community? Because I'm not sure if there is any published data to say that it should be number of active users versus engagement versus, because you said there are a couple of reasons and you keep evolving. So just want to hear from each of you, what were some of the early metrics that you had, and what would you call a successful community? Would that be more people signing in every day, or would that be good conversation? You spoke of tangible, intangible as well. So, yeah.
So if we're talking about metrics, we're actually very metric driven with our community, being a game developer. And what we like to use is, this is a terminology which was originally developed at Zynga, the Farmville guys, and it's called, it's Cur, Ner, and Rur together. So I'm not going to go into each one because we'll be here all day. But CURR is really our North Star when it comes to community, and that's current user return rate. How we measure this is how many people logged in just in a cohort of sort of 7 days, how many people 2 weeks ago logged in who then logged in the week after, right? And then you get a percentage drop off of, and if you have a high curve percentage, that means you have a very low drop off. You don't want to count new users in that cohort because new users churn a lot faster. They join a community and it's like, it may not be for them or whatever. But those who do stick to your community, how well do they stick? So yeah, just to give some, it depends, I'm from the gaming industry, so like I can't really give a good or bad number, I guess. But in gaming, generally if 80% of people are sticking on, that's a great sign of a week-on-week retention number. We find that people, another interesting thing is that people engage in our products whether or not they engage in the community. So we can compare CUR of a community member versus a non-community member. And often there's sort of a 10-20% difference between a sort of a social player and a non-social player. Yeah, so that's our North Star. But Rur and Ner, that's a reactivated returning user, and Ner is a new user return rate. There's really great blog posts on this.
I was going to say that.
Oh,
I was
thank
going
you.
to suggest that if there's no blog post on this, you should write one, because it sounds like an interesting concept to read about.
Yeah.
This is like a question which on a weekly call, the founder one-on-one always asks me, you're building the community, so what is it? What is the X number? Can we be data-driven, Aditi? But I think referrals as a matrix is something that a founder refers to another founder, they find value, they help another founder, and I think this is the biggest matrix for us. Also, how a community member would flow from top of the funnel to engagement to a conversion would be another matrix. And if I was to say, we have 1,000 signups on our platform, and it's a very small market, in, especially if I compare it to the 10,000 conversations. I think because of community, about 50% go from top of the funnel to engagement. And then depending upon the need basis, this is my little experience of, especially with Recur Club right now.
So the way, like our version of community, which I would say, which is the V1 that we had tried earlier. So there would be two things that we would typically track, because we are also investing, some amount of resources in building that. So both objective as well as subjective. So objectively, obviously, you will track, what is the, for instance, to give you an example, like the newsletter that we have launched, which is not a product that we are doing, but it is helpful for the community that we are addressing to. So for that, you can measure objective things, basic things, right? Like what is the open rate, what is the open rate over time, how many subscribers did it get add on, how many forwards. So that's the objective one. Plus, you would add like the subjective one, like you would ask some of the customers or whenever you're interacting that, did you find it valuable? Was it useful? So that is the other one, that is it useful to them? Is it adding value to them or not? Otherwise, you can, probably put your resources in something else. So I think that is another thing that you constantly keep asking, that, is it exciting even after after 2 months, 3 months to them?
Right. Thank you. I have some notes to make. Thanks.
Awesome. So thank you guys and girls so much for being on this panel. Thank you so much, audience, for asking us great questions. I'm happy that we got some cross-domain, which was the point of this panel, cross-domain expertise to shine through. And thank you so much, Leo, for allowing us to, be on this panel.